We love you, Stephen.
That's the first time I've ever done that. I forgot to hit the record button. So I have to do everything we've just said. No, I don't. I'm joking. We're not going to go through everything. For those of you who are watching the recording back, it's my fault entirely. I'll be fired on the spot. I forgot to hit the record button. I'm so sorry. But basically, we were just very quickly talking about how do we start off with this third study of for Texas All-State. What's our approach? Thinking about where we're going to breathe, thinking about getting the right notes, thinking about our thumb key issue for B flat. That essentially is what we've been speaking about. And now I'm discussing how we begin. And so I'm saying I started with my metronome and I figured out my final tempo, my destination tempo, which was 62. So I put a big giant 672, sorry, not 62, 72 at the top. There's my goal. Now I also make this little messy table down the side. So every time I'm practicing, I record the tempo. Now you can see, just to make life easier, I have split it into 16ths. So my very first tempo that I practiced it at was 80, but the 16th note beat. So essentially half tempo. There it is there. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. You can go slower than that. You can go slower than that. But the goal is to find the tempo that you can play this at, that you never, ever, ever make a mistake. Not just once. No, like, oops moments. You know, I call them oops moments. You're not allowed any oops moments. And that means if you have to play it half the speed I just did, so be it. I have told this story many, many times before, but it has stuck with me. I apologize if you heard it before, but when this same gentleman that I studied with, David Nicholson, he was my teacher for a couple of years at undergrad. And he was a legend of the flute. He's no longer with us. He had been in the Scottish Chamber Orchestra for 40 years and all this kind of stuff. He had gone to college with James Galway. That's how I met Sir James, and all this kind of things. But David had this student who came from somewhere in Eastern Europe. I forget where it was. And she desperately wanted to learn the Eber concerto. And David said, "You're not ready for the Eber concerto. That's a very, very demanding, difficult piece." And she said, "I want to learn the Eber concerto." And David got so frustrated with her and said, "You're not ready to learn the Eber concerto." And she said, "But that's all I want to do. I have to learn it." And he said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. Come back next week and play me just the first page. And if you can play the first page perfectly with not a single wrong note and a single missed articulation, I will let you learn the Eber concerto." She was never going to manage this, so we thought that would be the end of that. So, and the Eber concerto is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about 15 pages long, if I remember right. So a week passed and she came back into her lesson. And David said, "Okay, first page of Eber. Now, if you know the Eber concerto, let me quickly put my original sound on. If you know the Eber concerto, it goes something like this. It's been a while since I played it. It's pretty fast. Anyway, she came in and she went, and played it like this kind of tempo. So instead of the first page being like 40 seconds, it was like 8 minutes or something like this. And she said, "There you go, not a single wrong note." And David was like, "Yeah, you're right." I never specified the tempo. So she had to learn the Eber concerto, and I don't know what happened after that. But the point being, we can actually really use that tempo. There is no tempo that is ever too slow to learn something. And my method over the years, especially when I was playing full time and I had to play so many different pieces at the same time and be preparing so many very difficult pieces at the same time, was this method of slowing things down, because it guaranteed I will never, ever, ever make a wrong note. And then we build. As long as you have something to build from, you're good to go. So when something looks completely overwhelming, this is the approach. So I'm going to set my metronome to 80. Can you hear the click? Great. Sorry, I'm just checking my original sound is still on. And we're going to play the first, let's take it up to here. So the first bar and a bit. That's a good chunk. Now, that's probably a day's practice. okay? I could spend so much time on just that, building it up. But once I've got it, I'm going to then do the next chunk, and then I'm going to add those chunks together, and then the next chunk, and then I'm going to add those chunks together. So over the course of a day or two, I mean, of course I'm practicing other things, I can get to the end of the study at a very, very slow tempo. Very, very slow tempo. And once I've done that, to be honest, the hard job is done. I call this the process of breaking the back, and all my students know what I'm talking about, and I'm like, we've got to break the back of this piece. And I don't know if there's a better way to say it. Some people say like woodshed it or something. Have you heard this expression, woodshedding? But if you think of buying a new book and the spine is really stiff and you have to kind of break it and before you can turn all the pages, that's the process here. We're breaking the spine so that we can actually turn the pages of the book. And that's the process. And it's slow and it's laborious and it's at times very frustrating, but it's absolutely crucial. It is possible to kind of play these things without doing that. But if the people that do it, the difference will be their performance being at a much higher level than the people who chose never to do that. So whatever you're learning, this is something I would really do. And that is the first week, 2 weeks, month, however long you have, that's the first thing you have to do. And until you've done that, we cannot go forward. But for now, we're going to jump forward. So let's say we've spent 2 weeks. We have now broken the back of this piece. There are no wrong notes when we play it. We understand what we're doing. We understand where we're breathing. We understand where we're using our thumb key, all this stuff. What's next? What comes next? Yes, Rebecca.
Connecting all the different phrases.
How do we do that?
Well, you have to make sure that you can play each section separately, but also that you can go straight together between all the sections and that it doesn't sound bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Basically, the answer would be we're going to start building up the tempo. We're going to start getting it faster. Now, if I'm sitting here at quarter note, excuse me, eighth note equals, no, I'm right. I'm sorry, 16th note equals 80. You can see how I've done it. So I've practiced a little bit until I can get it to 16th equals 100. And then I've gone up to 40 and 50, because here's the slow part, and then it starts to get fast. Once I got here, I then went into eighth notes, because there's my goal. And then you can see that actually my progress was very slow. It went 50 to 55, not 60, not 70, 50 to 55. A whole couple of days of practice, I was only able to get it 5 clicks higher. And then 55 to 60, and then 60 to 65, and then 65 to 72. So I quite like having this when I practice. You can see it in pretty much every piece or study I ever learn, because it's like a little map, a little road map of how I got there. So you can see the moment where I switched it from 16th into 8th, and then you can see how small a step I was taking every time. Sometimes I will practice something, and let's say I have it set to 50, 8th note equals 50, and I'll practice it through, and then I might literally put it to 51. Such a tiny amount, and I might practice through at 51, and then 52, and then 53, and then 54, and then 55. The biggest mistake I see people making with their metronomes is that they put the number up too high. The jump should be minute. So, excuse me, let's say I'm in here somewhere, I get to 140 or 150. Then what I'm going to do is start working on little nuggets. So I could split this up. Where's my zoom pencil? There, this is what I'm looking for. So here's a chunk, 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 here's a chunk. And I know this because I played it, but I can also see it. I can see where a kind of refresh of technique happens, if that makes sense. So let's take, this is chunk 1, let's take this as chunk 2, let's take this as chunk 3, and so on. Here's how I would be practicing this. I then do 2 things. I'm going to write these down for you because I think this is really, really important in my practice. If I can figure out how to get my pencil to come back. Oh, it's over here. Okay, so the first thing I do is rhythms. We'll call it that. And there's 2 rhythms I do. Ooh, it's very hard to do this with the mouse. Rhythm 1 and rhythm 2. Rhythm 1 is dotted with the 16th, and rhythm 2 is 16th with the dotted. So long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, and then short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. I know if you've been in any of my classes, you'll have heard me speak about that before. And the second thing I do, which is equally essential as far as I'm concerned, is what I call the moving fermata. And I'll explain that in a second. So it's very simple, and these two methods will allow you to take everything from 140 up to in 16th up to 72 in 8th. No doubt about it. Every single piece I learn that's got any technical issues, I apply these two systems, and I can pretty much play whatever I need to play. And the same for my students. There's no magic to it. It's just hard work and intelligent practice, as Trevor Weiss says in his book, if you ever read his books. So rhythm number 1, long, short, long, short, long, short, would go something like this. And then immediately we repeat it, short, long, short, long, short, long. Why does that work? Any ideas? Anyone think? I think that I know why that works. Because it does work. I mean, has anyone ever done this? Give me a wave if you've done this. Yeah, you've never done it, Rebecca? Going to change your life. Going to absolutely change your life. Seriously. Rita's waving away. The reason it works, I mean, who knows for sure, but here's why I think it works. Of course, when we're playing our flutes, what we're trying to do is build muscle memory, those kind of neurological pathways that our body instinctively knows where it's got to go with the fingers, where it's got to go with the embouchure, what it's got to do with the air. And the more we practice, the more it gets clever at doing that. If you are playing long, short, long, short, long, short, you're taking our tune and you're splitting it in half. Half of it you're playing double time, and half of it you're playing half time, like half the speed. The reason that works is because playing fast is not difficult, but playing consistently fast is difficult because our brain has less time to figure out what's coming next. So anyone can play 2 notes fast. Even the person on their very first lesson can play an A and a B incredibly fast. That's all they're doing. But can they play? No, of course not, because they need to build the muscle memory. So if we are speeding things up and then we're slowing the other half down, we're buying our brain time to digest what's to come next. So we're playing one bit really fast, and then we're allowing it to catch up because we're playing a bit slow, and then we're playing one bit really fast, and then we're allowing ourselves time to catch up. So we're getting good at the coordination and the pattern of half of the notes. You know, on, off, on, off, on, off. And then what do? We change it from long, short, long, short, long, short to short, long, short, long, short, long. We switch it around. So the bits we just did slow, we now do fast. And the bits we just did fast, we do slow, which allows our brain some time to catch up. So over the space of the two ways of doing it, we've played this. And also, we've played it both ways, just within itself. So suddenly we've just got really good at playing something fast without even realizing and giving ourselves time to do it. So I would be applying these 2 rhythms onto everything. Is that making sense? Everything. And I mean, any piece you ever play, this works just as well. For example, Chaminade. That bit there, you can do it there. And so on. I mean, any piece at all, I promise you. Eber Concerto, the thing I just played, instead of... and so on. I mean, there is no magic to this. I just can't stress it enough. And the people who do it and take the time to do it will just be such a more advanced and sophisticated player. So that's the first thing. So once I get to a little bit faster, I'm going to start adding in the rhythms. And that can be quite time consuming. And I might do it chunk by chunk. So I might do chunk 1, and then chunk 2, and chunk 3, and then I might make a whole chunk out of the 3 of them, and so on and so forth. Then I come to what I call moving fermata. So a fermata is just a pause on a note. Normally we'll see it. Is there any in this study by any chance? How do I get rid of this? There. Oh, how do I clear that? Sorry, you think I would know how to do this by now? Where's my eraser? There. Let's get rid of all this. Um, there is no formatas. Basically, it just means you're going to hold a note for a long time. But I changed the note. So I constantly change the note. So if I put the first fermata on the first note, for example, it would be, and I'd maybe put them on all the first notes, like that. Something like that. I mean, it sounds weird, I know. Then I move the fermata to the second notes. Sorry. And so on. You'd have to sit and work it out. Then you move it to the third note, then the fourth note, then the fifth note. So the fermata is constantly moving. So we've done our rhythms, we've done our fermatas. So easy. You just build the memory. I mean, I hadn't practiced this in 3 months or whenever I last played it, and even that quickly, I already now can play the first bar. So I'm confident with these techniques I could get this up pretty quickly. So that for me is the key to this study, because it's so awkward to understand what's going on with all the notes. If you apply these two things and you use your metronome, you can't lose. You literally cannot lose. Anyone got any questions at this point? I know I'm doing this quickly. Questions before we start working on some corners? Rebecca, you want to play some? You don't have to, but it'd be great if you
I've learned about 3 measures in this.
could.
I,
Okay.
I
When is
got
the
sick
audition?
every week for like 2 months
Say that
during
again,
the
I'm
time I
sorry.
was a drum major, so I focused on the other two. But I can play measure 8. Sort
Okay.
of.
When is the audition?
Um, dude, less than 2 weeks.
Okay, so you have a huge amount of work to do. You can do it, but you need to use these systems.
Yeah.
Let's apply these systems to
I,
measure 8. So first things first, let me hear long, short, long, short, long, short, because measure 8 is the most perfect measure for it in the whole thing. Just check your original sound for us. Hang on, think of it like this. Think of it like this. Long, short, long. Don't do short, long, but long, short, long, short, long, short. Good. And I would do that 5 times. And if we make a mistake, we go back to time number 1. And I use that for everything. I know you've all heard this system before. Okay, do it for us 5 times. Okay, so we're going back to time number 1. Okay, so you get the idea. We would do that 5 times. Of course, we'd be doing this with a metronome, but if I put my metronome on, it won't work for you. So now we reverse it to short, long, short, long, short, long. So do that one.
hmm.
So this one's always the trickier one. It's slightly easier for me because I'm Scottish, and it just sounds like every Scottish tune ever written. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. But break it into a little chunk. So even the first chunk is fine. We'll go. Short, long, short, long, short, long. It's just 3 groups. Yes. Again. Good. Now do the second group. Again. Fantastic. Now put both groups together. Yes, we got it. Again. Okay, now add the third group, or do the third group on its own once and then add them together. And then the last group. Good. Add them all together. Very nice, very nice. Already better. Okay, so now we're going to do it twice. Once in the first rhythm, once in the second rhythm, like this. You don't have to do it quite that fast, but you see the idea. I'm just playing it fast so we're not waiting for my playing to be done for ages. So once long, short, and once short, long, short, long. Organize it in your brain. Very good. Almost. Just a little slip at the end. But for now, we're moving on. And we wouldn't do that in normal practice, but we will now. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, now we're going to add the moving fermata. We'll make the moving fermata the pause on the first of each group. So it's going to be like this. Your go. Good. Now onto the second note. So we go. So just pausing on the second note. So imagine it as a little upbeat. Ba da 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 da. That's it. And on the last group, you don't have the same number of notes, but that's fine. You can still pause on the second, and you just finish it, or whatever you like. Do it one more time, pausing on the second note. Okay, now on the third note. So it's just going to move one note later. Just you now have two upbeats. And so on. Yes, you got it. You figured it out now. Good. And the fourth one? Fourth pause? And the fifth pause? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. Good, and just we're obviously you're going to practice a lot more on your own, and then on to the sixth pause. That will not work for the last group, so you just play the last group.
Wait a minute.
That's pretty close.
No.
E flat.
Mm-hmm.
Do that one again. Do that one again. So just think of it as like a little upbeat the whole way. That's still the fifth, Rebecca. That's still the fifth note. We're going for the sixth note, the last note of each group. That's it.
No.
Yep, that's it. That's the idea. Now, whole bar like this. Keep the air moving through the flute. It's easy for you now. Just don't let it be hard in your head. Good. You're doing something that I hear a lot of people doing, and it confuses me. And I think you're making life a little difficult. You're stopping playing in the middle of practicing a phrase, and I'm not sure why people do it. I'm trying to fit. I try and fit. My student, one of my students here does that, and I'm like, don't keep going, because it's like you make the mistake before it ever happens. So you'll kind of do this. I don't understand. Just play, because if it's wrong, we'll go back and fix it. But by doing that, it's kind of just like The problem is every time we do something that's not right, we're practicing getting good at doing it wrong. So keep the air moving, because when you go into your audition and you play, you can't do that, of course. So keep the air moving. You actually are building up the muscle memory through all these exercises, so you can rely on almost switching the brain off and just letting it happen, and I guarantee it'll be correct. Try it one more time. Just lots of air and play the bar.
Hmm.
You just did it there. You just did exactly the thing we're talking about there. You see how you stopped?
Where am I?
Measure eight. Yes, there you go. That's it. Again. What are you trying to work out?
It doesn't sound like it's six, but I feel like I'm playing six and I can't hear it anymore.
Why do you think of it in two little groups of three, if that's easier for you? So you could even practice it like that. We'll do it. Why not? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. Good. Now just play it as written. There you go. There you go. So this is my approach to this. That's, I would say, one of the easier bars in the piece, so we have to be very, very careful um, about some other bits. But that is the idea. You can learn this incredibly quickly, actually, once you get over the shock of what on earth is going on. But that's it. But one of the bigger things that's going to cause people problems is the stopping. And I know that might be a kind of a thing that some people say that's not true, because if you stop, then you might have chance to fix the note. But actually, all we're doing, I'm convinced, in that situation is getting good at stopping. And we can't do that. We use all the other techniques to build the muscle memory, and then there has to be an element of trust in our brain, and where you are still listening and quantifying the sound that we're playing with, and making sure that the embouchure is doing what it does, but we can trust that the fingers are going to be in the right place, because we just spent all the time doing it. And if they're not in the right place, then we're not ready to put it all together. We have to go back and do more rhythm work, more moving fermatas, more grouping everything in different ways. Anything you can, just to build up the muscle memory. And sometimes there would be a measure. For example, here is a nice one to do. In 7, you see this double flat. That can cause us some problems. So let's say I just kept playing this bar and that was wrong all the time. I might literally take 3 notes and just work on them. You know, find whatever little variations I need to do, and then maybe add 1 note before. And so on. Obviously, this would be much longer and more thorough than what I'm doing. And then I might add 1 note on the end. so on until we can get, do you know what I mean? And it all just clips in. This whole thing is going to be like a jigsaw. The whole thing is going to be like, we get this little bit, we get this little bit, we stick it in, and we start building up the whole picture. So that is my approach, especially in your situation where you're kind of running out of time. That is absolutely my approach. All these things that we now understand, precipitando, sciolto, all this stuff, or sciolto, I'm not quite sure you say that one. We know that means freedom, and we know this means hurrying. I would not be putting them in until I can do this, I don't want to say dull version, but very square, accurate version. Of course, every crescendo, every diminuendo, every phrase I'm trying to pick up and put in all the time. But I'm not going to do any funny business until I know that I can get through everything very, very securely. And then once we've done all this rhythm work, we go back and we start to increase our tempo one more time. And then perhaps around here, I might stop and do the same thing with the rhythms and fermata again, and then I can build it up to the end. And I would make a little plan. If I've got 2 weeks to do this, here's what I'm going to do on week 1, or even day 1. Here's what I'm doing on day 2. Here's what I'm doing day 3, and then you can make sure you're where you need to be. I have to do that a lot when I'm learning concerti and things like that, because often it's memorized, and time is ticking with all the other concerts I may have to do or teaching that I have to do. So organization is the key. We're running out of time. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask me either about this study or more generally? I'm happy to answer anything, but maybe no one does. It's a very small class today, but please don't be shy. If there's anything you want to know, that is a good time to do it. Rebecca, do you have any specific questions about the study? No? Rita, Anthony, any of you guys? Clearly depressed everybody. Depressed everyone and made them all quit the flute. Well, these are tricky studies. I mean, for me, when I'm practicing, I do a 1 study a week. I mean, removing the all-state aspect, I do 1 study a week in my own personal practice. If they're short, I might do 2. Oh, there's a chat. Let me just quickly read it. What is the name of that book again? It's the Mary Karen Clardy Flute Etudes book, Volume 1. She has 2 volumes of them, and both published by Schott. And this particular study is in Volume 1. But this particular study actually comes from the Karg-Elert Caprices. I think they're Caprices. So the number 35 actually is to do with this particular book. It's number 35 in this book. In the actual Karg-Elert studies, I think it's 12. Am I remembering that right? Let me check. But the reason we're working from the Mary Karen Clardy book is because that's the set book for the Texas All-State Studies, and they have 3 studies, and each of them comes from this book, but they're all by different composers. What number is it in the actual original Karg-Elert set? Do I not even have it on my iPad? Surely I do. Yeah, turns out I don't. I do somewhere, I just can't find it. So, I mean, what I was going to say though is I practice 1 study a week at least. My students all have to practice 1 or 2 studies a week, and we have a whole systematic approach. This was something I was taught by James Galway as his student. This is just how we practice, because that's how he does it. And the first thing we have to do is say, well, what is the point of this study? Because almost all of these etudes have been composed by flute players. Interestingly, Karg-Elert is the one non-flute player who wrote a study book for us. He was actually an oboist, but he clearly knew what was the issue with the flute. So the first thing you have to say is, well, what is the point? Why did the composer write this for us? Because it wasn't for Texas All-State Studies. It was so that if we were to do 1 study every week, every time we turn the page, we're addressing a new issue within the flute. So the question you have to say to yourself for all 3 of these studies for Texas is, what is the point? What is the composer's intention? What are they trying to teach us? And then for this process, most importantly, why did whoever selected these studies select them? What are they trying to learn about me as a player from listening to me play these studies? Which is where I have the issue with this year's studies. I don't know if they show off, especially number 1 and 3. I don't really know what skills exactly they're trying to get from young people in these things. It just is a bit of a scramble, and I think it's very possible to throw yourself through these studies and just kind of make it a bit of a scramble and kind of get to the end. And for me, virtuosity is not the most useful skill to have in playing in an ensemble. It's important, but control of sound, accurate rhythm, great pulse, awareness of intonation, and great flexibility is far more important. Certainly when I have been sitting on audition panels for professional jobs, that's what I'm interested in the players. But that's just my opinion. So you have to look at these studies and you have to say, well, why have they chosen this, and what can I show them that I have in my playing in this study? And then you find that and you pull it out and you make sure that you smack them in the face with it. Yeah. For me, one thing that would always be an issue would be pulse, steadiness of pulse. I want to make sure that someone isn't getting faster and isn't getting slower. The slight complication we have here is the word sciolto, which means freedom. So if you are going to be a little freer with your version, you have to make sure that it sounds deliberate and obvious, and it doesn't just sound like you can't keep pulse or you can't keep time, because that's a skill that takes a lot of work to develop, and we're all working on it constantly, and is probably the most obvious thing on any edition that someone does not have. And I guarantee you, anyone listening to, whether it's orchestral excerpts or Texas or Louisiana or Mississippi, all state studies, wherever you want to go, they're probably, without you realizing, just like conducting along under the table or tapping, just to make sure that the pulse that you said at the beginning is absolutely the right pulse. So one thing I do, and I would do it with all 3 studies, is before I play them in the edition, I just take 5 seconds to hear it in my head. Doesn't matter if it's this fast one. There's my tempo, I got it from that, and now I copy it. Or the slow one, which is this year's slow one. So I'm setting that pulse in my head, and then I'm copying it. And I do it in every edition I've ever played. I also do it in every concert I ever do. Last week, the first piece in the program was the Bach C major sonata in my recital, and I have to get the tempo right. I start it off, so I just heard in my head, and then I just copy it, rather than just starting to play and trying to fix something. I make sure that I hear exactly what I want to replicate in advance. Does that make sense? Very important skill that I think people can develop. Great. Okay, well, if there's no questions, we'll end the class there. Thank you so much for joining us. That was the last of the Texas studies. I'll do one more class this year for Flute World next month. It will not be related to Texas All-State Studies. I need to run and past them what my suggestion was. Next year we're going to start running, I believe, like some series of things. I would love to do a series on Tafnel and Gobert, and I would love to do a series on French music, and I would love to do a series on Mozart Concerti, and I'd also love to do a series on Bach sonatas again. We kind of touched on it this year or last year, but I'd like to repeat some of them in a bit more detail. So please check out all the Flute World classes. It's great that they do these for us as a flute community. I watch them all and take part in as many as I can, and I love working with them. So thank you to Flute World, and thank you to you guys. I hope you have a great remainder of your Sunday. Good luck, Rebecca, with your All-State editions. You got some time. Get practicing like you never practiced before. Best of luck. Let me know how you get on with them. Okay, thanks everybody. See you later.